Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how long will this take? I get asked this question a lot, or I hear complaints a lot about the length of time it takes, and I don't care if we're talking about divorce or custody or anything else related to family court. It's always, why does this take so long? How long is this going to take? When is this going to be done? When you're dealing with somebody that's a narcissist, really your case being done isn't really being done with the insanity with them, right? Because that goes on even afterwards. And sometimes usually it will get a little bit better, but sometimes it can actually get worse because there's nobody watching them anymore, right? There's no court, there's no attorneys, there's nobody kind of monitoring the situation ongoing. They feel freer to try to bully you or manipulate or whatever. So actually, a lot of times it can get worse. And, I have clients that I've worked with for, 2 to 3 years ongoing, just because the insanity of the person they deal with on the other side is that bad. It's that crazy making. And so just having that support and that touch point where you can reach out and get a little assistance and a little reality check in dealing with them can be really instrumental in maintaining your own sanity in this process. But I think people are often amazed at how long it actually does take. Some states are faster than others. I know of some states where you're in within 60 days, you're in a custody, negotiation, and they either send you to mediation, or some states have what we call conciliation, and they're getting you in and getting a parenting plan figured out right from the start. I think because those states have kind of figured out, okay, everything, runs down from custody. And so we're just going to start with that straight off the bat. A lot of places, wait until you file something. And so that generally means, okay, we're going to wait till everything comes to a head and there's so much conflict that somebody files something, and then we'll have to deal with it. And I would say that's the vast majority of states, including California. California doesn't do anything until one of the parties files and asks the court to actually do something. And I can tell you the average length in California is about 12 to 18 months. They try to get them done in 12. They don't always succeed at that, particularly in high conflict cases, because there's so many different little nuances that can come up that add time into the case. And that can be frustrating because a lot of times emotionally we just want it over and done with. But there are advantages sometimes to things being a little more drawn out. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. When we go into court, a lot of times if you have high conflict, you might end up with a custody eval. That can take months. You might end up with an attorney for the children. Okay. Some places call that AFC. Some call it BIA. Some call it a GAL. We call it Minors Counsel here in California. So again, tons of names, tons of acronyms that all mean the same thing, which is typical in the legal system. And that can take months when you have somebody like that involved that's then going to give a report. Sometimes they're waiting for one of the parents to complete some sort of alcohol assessment or medical evaluation or psychiatric assessment, or, all these different things that come into play that can really slow things down. And usually from the time you request a hearing until you actually get one is generally 2 to 3 months. And if you're asking for a trial, depending on how long the trial is and depending on your state, it can be pushed out for months. I see people wait 6 to 12 months for trial if they need a couple days or more. That's not uncommon whatsoever. So the process just moves really, really slow when you're relying on the court to make all the decisions because you're in conflict and can't reach agreement. Honestly, reaching agreement is your fastest path out of this. Okay. Thomas and I have had a client, I think our record, we did a mediation several years ago where the couple came in and they were like, we have not told our kids. We're going to tell them it's summer. We want to get this done before school starts. We're going to tell our kids, we're going to list the house on the market. We're going to sell it, and we're each going to buy individual homes. in the same area, and we want to do all the paperwork, get everything done this week. And it's like, okay. So they came in, we filed, did all the paperwork, and submitted their judgment. And I mean, there's a 6-month cooling off period in California, which means that you can't be single, right? You can't have your marital status terminated for 6 months, but you can have all your paperwork processed by the court before that time frame if you guys are in agreement with everything. And I think that's the fastest one we've ever done. We've got a colleague here locally who's kind of known for divorce in a day. And that's essentially what she does. She sits down with the people and she just cranks right through it in one day, and they submit everything and they're done. Now, that's great when people are in agreement and it works that way. I would say even when people do ultimately reach agreement, it doesn't usually happen that fast, right? That quickly. But definitely getting into mediation, getting into some form of alternative dispute resolution will usually be far faster and far less expensive than going through the traditional court process where you're asking the judge to make the decisions on everything, okay? But if you're in a situation where you really can't reach agreement with the other person, they won't agree to anything, or their requests are so extreme, and you want to just pull your hair out because you're so frustrated by the process taking so long, let me give you a couple reassurances, okay? A lot of times as this process moves along, the more times the court sees you, and I don't think it's a good thing for the court to see you all the time because you're high conflict, but if the court has the ability and they see you 2 or 3 times leading up to trial, it usually starts to give them a better idea of the people. It gives them a better idea of the conflict involved, the difficulty of the parties, who's the jerk, so to speak. And most of the time, it does take the court some time and a few touch points for that to start becoming evident. So sometimes when the process is dragging along, it can be helpful in that area. The other thing that can be helpful is if you currently have a parenting situation that you like, where you have more of the parenting time, where you have the vast majority of it, and you like that, then I would say drag it out as long as you can, because if your attorney's saying, look, you're probably going to end up with 50-50 or something like that, and you currently have 70% time, well, why would you want to rush through it? I mean, I understand that there's value in being done. It's emotionally stressful trying to move through this process, and we get to the point where we just want it to be done and over with. But there can be things in it that can be used to your advantage. A lot of times what will happen too is over time, that person, if you're dealing with a narcissistic person on the other side, a lot of times they'll start to show their true colors, or you'll be able to gather more and more evidence of the difficulty of them as things happen. When you're moving through life and your children have a doctor's appointment, or your children need braces, or your children need vaccinations, or your children need to change schools or start school, enroll in school, whatever it is. If you're going through that and you're trying to negotiate with the other person and you're having trouble at every turn, or you're hitting roadblocks, then you're now going to have that evidence for the court that you wouldn't have had before if it hadn't have taken this long. And that length of time allowed you to gather that additional evidence. So there are ways to use the time factor to your advantage if you know how to communicate and do things in a way that kind of boxes that person in a little more and gathers more and more evidence that works to your advantage, okay? And again, just because the process ends doesn't mean the insanity is really going to stop. It just means that the insanity is going to shift, right? It's going to look a little different. I think the other thing that happens is sometimes we'll get like temporary, particularly custody orders. We'll get temporary custody orders from the court, and then we continue moving through the process and trying to negotiate the rest of the case. And what's happening as you're doing that is you're figuring out, oh, this doesn't really work with the schedule, or, oh, we didn't put in specifics around pickup and drop off times, or who was going to transport, or, what days the child has after school care, or all these little things that a lot of times are difficult for us to remember in the moment when we're getting court orders and we don't get the little detail in there. And the court, of course, doesn't always know all those details about our lives. And so then we're kind of left with this parenting agreement that over the long haul doesn't always work real smoothly. Having a temporary plan and then having the case kind of keep going on for a certain period of time actually gives you time to figure out what those kinks are and to work them out. And if you have a parent on the other side that you don't think is in this for the children, and I hear that a lot. I hear when I'm dealing with people who have a narcissist on the other side, they frequently will say, well, they don't really care about the children. They only care about money, or they only care about how it looks to other people, or whatever it is. If that's true, then the longer this drags out, the more chance that they're eventually going to revert back to their old tendencies and only care about themselves and not follow through with the children. It gives you a chance to show the inconsistency because they may become more inconsistent as time goes on because it's dragging on and on for them too. Those are the ways that you can kind of maybe use the time factor to your advantage, even though I know how frustrating it is to have this drag on and on and on. Okay. If you'd like to learn more about how you can move through this process or how you can use these things to your advantage, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page where you can book a free consultation with a member of my staff so that you can learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on this journey. See you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the